Florida's anti-riot bill. So recently, Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida signed this bill into law called an anti-riot bill. And although I don't have a list of all the provisions, I'll give you some of the highlights. Effectively, if you are in a protest and one person is violent, just one person, and by the way, well, let me get to that in a second. If one person is violent, then everyone in that protest can go to jail. You don't even have to have done the illegal thing. And because you're there, you can be brought to prison. Guilt by association. One of the other provisions is that if you accidentally hit someone with your car and you claim self-defense, so if protesters are blocking a road, or if they're blocking, an area, and you fear for your life, and you hit them by accident, you can't be charged. You could murder people and not be charged, as long as you claim you fear for your life. Who else? Who else has this? Oh, right, the police. So now, we are creating the same legal loopholes for regular people who hate protesters that we do for killer cops. So, of course, this is incredibly problematic. And by the way, one more thing about the guilt by association part of this law is that this is a gift to agitators. And not even agitators who are with the movement. You could have police agitators, FBI agitators. One person throws a rock, you kettle up the whole protest, and you chuck them in jail. This is an anti-protest bill. This anti-riot bill, its sole purpose, and Governor DeSantis more or less admitted as much, is to reduce, if not eliminate, the amount of protests that can happen in America. This is fundamentally unconstitutional. But this is not the first bill that has some of these provisions in it. As you may remember, during the Dakota Access Pipeline fight, there were laws passed in South Dakota, I think it's South Dakota, to make it so that if you hit someone with your vehicle by accident, then you got off scot-free. No one could even charge you for the crime. And by the way, copycat bills of these are being put into legislatures all around the country. This is, first of all, it's fundamentally unconstitutional, but it's also fundamentally undemocratic. One of the promises that was made by the Founding Fathers, all their flaws aside, was that the people would have the right to have their grievances heard and their grievances redressed. And the way that we make our grievances heard is twofold. One, we elect politicians who we expect to carry our message to the halls of power and to change things. But two, we protest. And a protest, as well as just getting a message out there, as well as being informative, it's meant to be disruptive. The point is to make you feel powerless, to make the people on the other end of the protest, to make them feel powerless, to make them feel helpless. That's the point. Without disruption, protest is not, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't cause people to think more deeply. Now, some protests can be informative, but in order for protests to change anything, they have to be disruptive. And two of the ways that protests are disruptive is sometimes they break private property, and sometimes they cause private persons to have to wait, to be uncomfortable. They agitate. So, if you create a situation where the violence of one is the violence of all, you essentially stop people from going out and having their grievances heard. And if grievances are not heard, they cannot be redressed. We fundamentally take away your free speech, free assembly rights. We take away one of the fundamental rights guaranteed by a democracy. Demos, the people, rule. Because if you cannot have your voices heard, then the people in the halls of power will not respond to you. They will not redress your grievances. So it is my hope, and I have heard that it will be challenged, that this law and every law like it is struck down. Because if we don't stop these types of laws from coming into effect, we are going to create avenues where murders of protesters are normal and legal and fine. And perhaps equally importantly to that, we are going to take away one of the only abilities that people have to get the rest of society to view their problem. One more thing I want to talk about with protests is if you think about these large protests, these large marches, the media covers them, right? So not only are you using a protest to create a situation where other people feel uncomfortable, that discomfort attracts attention, often the attention of cameras. Those cameras then broadcast that message, or some version of that message, if it's not perfect, because the broadcast is not perfect, I mean, to the rest of the world. How is it that we would have had the incredibly large protests about the George Floyd killing if it wasn't for these protests that happened in America being broadcast to the rest of the world, making people feel uncomfortable, making people feel like something had to change? We created a world of solidarity. Now, it didn't last as long as it should have, but the truth is people saw it, people understood that what happened was wrong. Protest did that. Even violent protests did that. You don't have to agree with the destruction of private property, but the truth is that action, the action of disrupting private business, of disrupting private property, of disrupting private persons with power, is that you created an urgency about an issue. And if you take away people's ability to do that, or you mark huge swaths of people guilty by association, well, you fundamentally take away people's ability to participate in democracy. And once people can no longer participate in democracy, you no longer have democracy. The word democracy means rule by the people, rule by the demos, the people. So if you act in such a way to take away that power that we have to participate in our democracy, whether it's voting or protesting or even rioting, then you fundamentally change us from a democracy to an oligarchy, or to worse, an autocracy. And we can't let that happen. We can't let it happen in Florida. We can't let it happen in the Dakotas. We can't let it happen anywhere. At no point should we sacrifice our ability to speak out, our ability to raise grievances, for some semblance of physical security. We're not going to get it. The trade-off isn't worth it. So I look forward to these bills, to these laws being struck down. It is my hope that they are struck down because they are fundamentally unconstitutional. But given the way that the courts have been ruling, it's hard to say for sure whether they will. And it's definitely something that I'm nervous about. But for now, I'm trying to be hopeful that these laws will be challenged and that they'll be quickly struck down, and that lawmakers will learn enough from the stink that has been caused from these bills, that they will not try such a brazenly undemocratic law again.